Hello, listeners of the future and the present. Welcome back to another episode of Classin' Up the Joint. I am your host, Colin. I use they and he pronouns, and I am your debatably friendly DM and creative director here at The Roll Report. I am joined by two fantastic guests. I am so excited to speak with both of you. Thank you for joining us. And would you like to go ahead and introduce yourselves so we know who we are talking to?
Hello, adventurers. I'm Natalie Funia. I am the producer and creative director over at the Storyteller Squad, which is our Monster of the Week actual play podcast series. You can find my accounts online at Natalie Fuina, and you can find us online at Story Squad Cast if you're into that stuff. But maybe you won't be when we're done with this interview. I have thoughts.
We like people with thoughts.
Yeah, I'm
Way
the
to sell
editor.
it.
I act as art director and organizer, and I wear many, many hats
And
here
DM.
at TSS. And yes, I'm the keeper of monsters and mysteries. Yeah. Is that enough of an intro? Brittany,
Oh yeah,
your turn.
I mean, go on as long as you want.
Great.
Whole hour intro.
Yeah, she could do it. Hello, I'm Brittany. I'm also from the Storyteller Squad. I am a cast member and also the event coordinator. So I voice the character Raven in our main campaign, and I help us make sure that we get to conventions so we can see people's lovely faces in person and maybe sell them some cool stuff with cute critters on it.
Amazing. We love faces. Because we were just talking about this, I'm like remembering I got really good at identifying people's faces from like nose up.
Yeah.
For a period of time. I was like, oh, I still know who that is. And now I've realized there's people whose bottom half of their face I've basically never seen. Mm-hmm. And then I get very surprised.
I was in a meeting the other day, and someone was like, wow, it's so weird seeing your whole face. I'm so used to only the eyes. I'm like, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I had some coworkers like that. I didn't see the bottom half of his face for months. It's like, I don't know what you look like. If I saw you without a mask, I wouldn't know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
When you saw them, did they look like you expected?
They were a little bit different. I think my brain had filled it in a little different. And I had no idea. It's so weird. Your brain just assumes things.
And I think there's like the structural shape of people's like jaw and cheekbones are very hidden. And so like, I feel like I remember this, like a friend of mine was like, I feel like you just have that like very classical kind of square jaw look. And then I was like, oh no, I am so wrong.
Or like, oh my God, that person has a beard. I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Wild stuff.
Anyway, moving to the present, away from our sordid past, maybe sordid, somewhat sordid. I make no assumptions.
Storied.
Storied. There we go. It's definitely storied past. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And one of the questions that I'm always curious about with every guest, and I'd like to offer to each of you, is how did you get started? Sometimes this is specifically how did you start playing D&D, but as the Storyteller Squad is more Monster of the Week, and I think I think if I'm right, at least Natalie, in your personal other games have like branched far, far afield. So how did you begin playing RPGs in general, and what was your gateway?
So my gateway was D&D 5e, as many of ours is, but it wasn't actually the game that I really like cut my teeth on TTRPGs with. I was in a D&D game for 4 or 5 sessions, a classic experience in 2015. And then the group just never got together again. It sort of folded. But one of the people who I was friends with and who had initially invited me to that game in the first place discovered a game called Mouse Guard, which is based on a comic book series of the same name. And she ran a campaign of that for 2 or 3 years. And so that was the first game I really, really was into, at least as a player. And I think like after picking up D&D, I bought the 3 core books and started like figuring out like, oh, I bet I could run this game. That'd be fun. And like tried it out a few times, again to like middling longevity successes, but like ran a few games of 5e, and I was using like some of the pre-gen campaigns that came out back then in the early days. and sort of would like mod the story myself to add little bits of flavor or whatever I thought would be fun. I had one group that I ran and had them literally just hang out, and like one of their NPCs was Doctor Strange, because I thought that was fun. It was like
Amazing.
the height of Avengers mania, and so I was like, what if multiverse, but real? And so
I love that.
yeah, so that was fun. But yeah, so then, gosh, what games did I play after Mouse Guard? I got really into LARP for a while, actually, after that. And so that was like another crucible of how to run games for other people.
Big overlapping Venn diagram there with D&D and LARP.
Yup, and tell stories for groups and that sort of thing, and, you know, pulled on my theater background. And so, yeah, so I was doing that for a bit. And then I think I just heard about Monster of the Week and some of these other indie games, because I would go to PAX and I would see the different games and things like that. And Monster of the Week had like caught my attention because of the Adventure Zone that did their season with it. And I was like, I really like modern, quote unquote, fantasy, right? Like with cryptids or people always point to like Buffy and Supernatural as the inspirations for Monster of the Week, but I haven't watched either of those shows. Really? Like, I've seen clips here and there.
I'm kind of amazed you managed to avoid those. Well, I guess Buffy, like Supernatural, I feel like most of the people I know and many of the people that I've met within D&D and RPG communities like point to Buffy as some fairly pivotal experience of their, I mean, usually adolescence and in some cases much later. And I don't know. I think congratulations on not having seen those.
I mean, I can point to exactly the two pieces of media that took their place, which is the Hellboy movies by Guillermo del Toro and the Constantine film, and then comics subsequently from there. And just that vibe, that like sort of slightly gritty but still playfully fantastic story about magic and mythos sort of still existing in the modern day. And that was like a big part of what I did all my illustration work on in college. And so Monster of the Week was just a thing that I was like, well, this game is that. And it is less work to prep than D&D, which is always the thing that would like bog me down or get me like up in my head about 5e. And so, yeah, I guess the rest is history that we can get into when we talk about the show specifically. Yeah. That's how I got my start and like found the game that I like the most.
Brittany, before I ask you the same question, I do want to like, I think the quick answer, we can maybe do a further dive. Just Natalie, the difference between, I guess, GMing LARPing, if that is the right word, the prep you have to do to run that versus a tabletop game. Because I imagine, this is very far outside what I am familiar with, but like when I'm prepping for a game, whatever system, I want to, here's my beats of my story, here's some of the NPCs, here's the things my players might encounter, and like that's my organization. It's like a few hours. But is it similar at all? Like what is it like prepping to run LARPs and be in charge of that?
It is much more like running a camp.
Okay.
Or
cool.
like a improvised stage production, I guess. Right, because everything is physical. Like, so you have to both have enough bodies on your cast, and it is a cast. It's not just the one person anymore. So then there's this like the collaboration that happens between you and the other members of the cast, and then the collaboration that happens between the cast and the player base. And so it's like stages of improvised storytelling where at cast meetings we would gather and come up with, all right, what are these fun ideas we want to do? All right, is that broad enough that it will target a large like percentage of the player base? And if that's true, what are we putting out at the same time with a smaller group of cast to make sure that the people that aren't interested in this plot line have something to do while that's happening? Because you want to keep everyone entertained the whole weekend that they're there, right? It's a 24-hour kind of experience. So
it's like running a camp and running an improvised show and running an immersive theater experience that happens for like 72 hours. Wild.
And you have a budget of basically nothing, and so you have to build sets out of
cardboard
tarps
and foam and duct tape goes a long way.
It
and
really
imagination.
Does. Yes.
Exactly.
And,
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the yeah. They are
Cool.
not anything
Okay.
alike, but the things that are alike are the things that you can get good at if you do both,
Yeah.
which are like how to invisibly railroad. We can get into that later. Like how to anticipate and predict what players might want, and then
Yeah.
also the flip side of that, how to adapt in the moment to when they don't do what you predicted, and you still need to continue with the scene and like
Yeah.
answer the solution or the outlandish suggestion they have put forth in their character
Definitely.
play. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. So Brittany, back to you. Yeah. How did you get started in RPGs, and what was your gateway?
My gateway was my best friend in college invited me to start playing D&D because they had just come out of a D&D game that had, fizzled after maybe a year or so. And they were like, I love this game. I want to keep playing. Let's make a character. And they had come from playing Pathfinder technically.
Okay.
And so I created a Pathfinder character by accident with a Pathfinder character sheet. And then we proceeded to try and play D&D 5e. So it was kind of this mess of trying
feel like
to fumble our way through
it's almost
5e
working. Yeah.
with a first-time DM who had only really played one game before. He did a fantastic job. Like, it was most of our first time playing for the rest of the group. We really fumbled our way through it, but had such a blast the whole time. And so I spent many, many Sunday nights staying very late at my friend's house, and my mom would get kind of frustrated with me, like, why are you coming home so late? I'm like, Mom, I'm playing nerd games with my friends, okay?
Yeah.
I'm in
It's
college. I
nothing
could be
bad,
out
I promise.
drinking.
I'm telling stories with friends until the wee hours of the night. Like, chill.
It could be so much worse.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of the introduction of like, oh, this is fun. I can see the potential here. It's fun to hang out with my friends and tell stories. And then eventually that game kind of fizzled out, as many of them do. But right after college, I got a job at an infamous TTRPG company. It was just surrounded by people who were obsessed with D&D. And so I kind of osmosis joined that love of it. I still really enjoyed it. I was a Critical Role fan. I loved listening to D&D. Big Adventure Zone fan. So I just kind of was surrounded by it all the time. And I started playing a bunch of one-shots, which turned out to be my favorite thing. I really loved coming up with a kind of not a joke character, but a character with one gimmick and something fun. And then just to play them once and put your whole self into it for fun and go super wild because you're only going to play them once.
Overcommit to the bit.
So who cares what happens if the whole story gets derailed? You're just going to play it this once with this table. But yeah, that was a big introduction to it. And then Natalie and I we had met previously through the cosplay community, but really getting to know each other was through when you ran that one shot for us at PAX East.
Yeah, that's right.
And a friend of mine was like, do you want to be in this one shot? This person I know is running it. Sure, I love one shots. That sounds fun. And that kind of kickstarted the friendship. It must have been 2019 or something.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I feel like that offers a nice segue into where did the Storyteller Squad start? And Natalie, maybe I want to ask you the genesis of the idea and how you went about assembling your cast.
Sure.
And then and Brittany, I want to kind of ask you in a minute the experience of running this multi-year campaign and having this character really grow versus one shot after one shot after one shot after gimmick after gimmick. But yeah, so Natalie, can you tell me a little bit about the beginnings of Storyteller Squad?
Yeah, so it was the dark times. We were all in the midst of our Animal Crossing era. I was part of a group that ran One Shot Sundays. It was the New England Critters. Shout out to them. They just sort of organized in the pandemic in order to have games happen virtually. And I had done some virtual gaming before that also, and was in an Avernus campaign that played online. But part of the one-shot Sundays was that people would feature different systems. And that was like a big draw because I was like, well, I've played a bunch of D&D, but like, ooh, someone's running this game. Someone's running this game. So my friend Kyle, who I know through LARP, he offered to run Monster of the Week. And I was like, ooh, a chance to like try out this game that I know vaguely about. Played one session and was instantly in love. And I was like, wow, that plays the way I wish D&D played. Just the way it is run and like the moves you have, the types of characters you play and the abilities they get. It was so exactly what I'd been looking for. And so I was like, I got to do something with this. I gotta. What am I going to do? Well, it's the middle of the pandemic. My career is sort of up in the air. I've always listened to actual play and really enjoyed it and felt like if I knew how to do any of the production, I probably could do something with this maybe. And just got it in my head like, I'm going to try. Let's just see what else is there to do but learn how to record audio and make a podcast. Like, sure.
Yeah.
I think like there might also have been some fortunate timing in that like at the time the McElroys had just released their like how to podcast book or something like that. And so like the idea was sort of out there percolating like, ooh, what if you did a podcast? What if you made a series? Like, well, I do like storytelling. And so
I appreciate on the only interruption, like just I appreciate how the barrier to entry there has become so much lower in the last, I want to say in the last like 10 years, just like anyone with a phone and headphones can start making a podcast and then you got to make it good if you want it to have longevity or like achieve any sort of money making. But
and even specifically in the last 4 years or 5 years of we were so used to, I was also in that New England Critters group playing in one-shots. I had just never ended up in the same one-shot as Natalie. I'm realizing just now. But we were all so used to playing D&D at home through the internet. And so you had, in order to do that, you had to have an internet connection and like headphones and a mic. So the barrier to entry had gotten even lower you at least have to do that to play at all. So why not just hit record?
Zoom had just become a thing. And it was like, oh, there's this like video meeting platform that's like cooler than Skype for some reason. It was the same. It didn't matter. It was the thing. Everyone was doing it, right? So a lot of pieces just sort of aligned. And, you know, like the pandemic, terrible, but silver linings, like it gave a lot of people time to sort of recenter and figure out like, what would I actually want to do now that I have none of these responsibilities on my back? You know, like
what's
my job right now
Yeah.
is to not get sick, not infect anyone I know, and to like survive until this blows over, right?
And to stay home.
And to stay home. And try to not go insane by being cooped up, right?
I mean, I've said this a few times. I started running 5 campaigns in April of 2020 because I was like, I need to see my friends and I can't just stare at a screen. But if we stare at a screen and imagine together and there's a time limit, then I can
If I can stare at a screen and look at your faces live, that's cool.
Totally.
So as far as like why I started, that was the reasoning. A lot of things were just like, it seems like the right time to try this. Okay, so what do you need? Well, you need a cast. Ooh, yeah, I do, don't I? Who am I going to play this game with? And like, it helps that I had tried to run D&D before with a lot of my like very close friends, and like already seen that it was not a thing they were willing to like pick up and really give 100% to. We had fun, you know, I ran a couple one-shots or I ran a campaign that would meet like every couple months. But I hadn't found a gaming group that like everyone involved was ready to commit or like wanted to do a long form type of thing. And so for better or for worse, I specifically didn't reach out to anyone I was already really close to because I'd already done a campaign with them or like seen that they were going to flake out on it. And like, that's fine. People have different things they're willing to commit to. So I was like, well, I got to find people who are going to stick with this if I'm going to make this a show. Like, it's got to be... So, and I also had to be very upfront. Like, hey, I'm thinking of making this a show, and so that means it's going to be like a commitment. Are you willing to do that and see how it goes and like meet every week? And so I reached out to people that I knew from the cosplay scene and the LARP scene, and I specifically chose people who I liked and wanted to know better. Because I, you know, you play games with people and tell stories, you instantly forge stronger connections with them because you're forming memories, right? It's this core human desire we have. And so, so I reached out to the group, and, you know, we have had some cast changes since we started, but for the most part.
I was just going to ask that, like how, and Brittany, I think you've been there since day one. I'm going to say day one. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I had actually just wrapped up a like mini campaign with the New England Critters. It was supposed to be a one shot that we were just enjoying and taking too long solving all their puzzles, so it turned into multiple sessions. And I almost didn't say yes to Natalie because I was worried that was going to keep going, and I didn't have enough time in my life for 2 games a week. Me laid off from my job,
not with that
playing
attitude.
6 hours of Animal Crossing every day. I was like, oh no, 2 games a week. This might be too much for me. But that game also fizzled out, unfortunately, but kind of for the better, because I was like, you know what? I think I do have time for this. Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be a show someday. That'd be fun, I guess.
That'd be neat.
At the very least, we'll play a game. And I didn't know pretty much anyone else that Natalie had invited. So it's kind of like, maybe I'll make some new friends. That'd be cool. Gotta do something.
My housemate and I, as we were rebuilding our home game, so I, you know, ran all these games from 2000 to whenever, and one of them wrapped in December of 23, and we're starting going, all right, what do we do next? Who do we want to hang out with for the next 3 years?
Yeah.
Yep.
And or get to know better. And so we've, you know, now our crew is like a couple, like one person from the last game, 2 friends, and 2 people that we're like, you're cool. We just want to get to know you better.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something really magical about that. Like I went from not knowing almost everyone else on the cast and kind of knowing Natalie to being so close to this group of people. They're some of my closest friends. Like, they all came to my wedding. Like, pre-pandemic, I did not know any of them. But now, because we've talked to each other at least once a week for the last 4 years, it really like builds some amazing relationships with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do want to like express how like grateful I am for the lucky break that was, right? Like there is a different, you know, timeline where I picked one different person and the group chemistry just kind of off a little bit, and like it didn't work in those early games. Like, one thing I can say is that fortunately, the group I put together, we like instantly had a fun time. Like, I remember ending the first session and being like, that was great. And everyone just like bright smiles, like, yeah, oh my God, I can't wait to play next week. Oh my gosh, your character. Right. And
That's
just
awesome.
immediately feeling like a little bit of like magic had happened in terms of like what got done in session 0 and then what happened in the first like story session that we did. And like, obviously things have evolved and changed, and certain people have left and other people have come in to join, but like mostly it is the same core group minus 1 or 2. And like, that's crazy. Considering half of the discussion we've had so far has mentioned how many games fizzle, like, you know. So
I mean, it's true. And then you hope that the ones that you like, that you really care about, grow. And even if you're like, oh, well, I'm going to end the campaign, but like, who's going to step up, do the next DM and like, and keep it going.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like games either last less than a year or are like a decade. And there's no in between. It's either a couple of sessions or we've been playing since we were children and I've known these people for 20 years.
Yeah. I really love, I think about very frequently. I don't know if you've ever seen the little documentary about the guy in, I think, Canada who's been playing the same game for 40 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's fascinating. I think Wired did a thing on him. Anyway, highly recommend it. I'll drop a link in show notes for listeners because it's super cool. But this guy basically, you know, took the original D&D, started modifying the rules, so he's playing his own system, but is like, oh yeah, we've been playing in the same world for this long. I've got like 30 players around the world, including my daughter, and I told her that if she breaks up with her boyfriend still gets to play, so, you know. And like,
He's
and the
in the
characters
world.
are, yeah, and like the characters are children of the first group of adventurers from, 40 years ago and stuff. It's like that is commitment to the bit right there.
Yeah.
That's a fleshed
beautiful.
out, well lived in world.
Right? Speaking of, Brittany, I want to, I think, turn this question to you as someone who's played in this world the whole time. Like, I'm trying to think of the specific question beyond like, how has it been for 4 years watching this world and the story that you were creating with all of your friends grow and change? And that feels like a really large question. So I don't know if that's like a good guide to just kind of be like, what has it been like, and how have you seen this story change from its beginnings to where you are now? And maybe tying that also into like, we have millions of Gimmick one-shot characters, and now you've had this character to dive into for 4.5, 5 years and watch them change and grow and deepen.
It's been so wild. I think I definitely played it safe making my character for this campaign because I was a little nervous just about the possibility of this could be a long-term game, and this is like a modern setting, so I can't go. I had this one staple one-shot character named Agatha who was a kobold. So like I can't go super fun and not fun, but I can't go super fantasy with this because it's modern. So like, all right, she's a woman about my age. Her personality is really similar to mine. I don't really have a character voice. It's kind of just my voice. Like I played it so safe with her. And she didn't have much of a personality in the beginning because I was just trying to feel out playing a game and being in character with all of these people who are into LARPing and much more experienced than I was, with like, here's a really strong character concept that has all this backstory and all this stuff that makes him so interesting right now. And I ended up with a character who a lot of her interesting stuff happened in the campaign. She kind of started very normal. And it's been so cool to watch her grow and as a player reach the point of being able to separate and be like, well, I personally would want to do this, but my character would choose to do this because we are two different people, and I'm going to play it with this decision because that's what she would do. And getting more into this character headspace and learning so much from Natalie and the rest of the cast on character choices and improving and really being able to like read where storylines are going and kind of anticipate that and doing like character voices and dialogue and stuff. It's been so cool. And then we also have this thing where, spoilers for the show, we have a time skip. And so I've been playing this character for 4 years, but she has existed for 5 or 6, I think, maybe closer to 7. Like she's lived in this world for longer than I've been playing her now.
I do love that question.
With that
like,
time
wait,
skip,
how much time has passed in game? Like,
yeah,
I know it was this long. I try to take notes about it. I'm like, nope, it doesn't matter. Can't matter.
Gets fuzzy in the middle.
Yeah.
But
it honestly, it might be the same, and we might be falling behind again, only because like I did the time skip, I remember initially, to catch us up to 2024.
That's true. Because
Like
there were some times
we started
where we
playing in 2020, and then it was like in 1 year of in-game time, maybe we like did the first 2 seasons. But that had already taken us to like the cusp of 2023, 2024. So I was like, well, for season 3, we gotta catch up, you know? Not that like our world or story really integrates itself with like current events, but just like culturally, you know, the characters are making references to things and like the jokes are, you know, current and stuff. So
yeah. We did specifically say, I remember this when we first started the campaign, that because this was a little escape from the pandemic, we didn't want any pandemic talk in it.
Yeah.
And so the world of the Storyteller Squad is like an alternate universe where COVID never happened. And also we have a female president.
Timeline?
Those were like the two big things.
That's so nice.
So it might be 2022 here and all of the
Yeah.
pop culture stuff is still kind of happening. So our references make sense. And like we have cell phones
Yeah.
and cars and all that kind of stuff. But
Sure.
just to be able to escape it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, the timing is still the same. But there is instances where we could play 4 sessions and it's been one single day.
Oh, yeah. Oh, 100%.
In the campaign. And then we play 4 more sessions and it's the next day. And
It's
that's
interesting.
been 2 months in the real world.
Yeah. I feel like that is a commonality across almost all RPGs, that you can spend a 4-hour session literally making one decision that has occupied like 45 seconds of your game time, except like the few of them that are very specifically designed to cover multiple years over your hours of gameplay or something.
Yeah. And then you'll start a new session and be like, all right, it's 2 weeks later since then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just like a mini time skip.
I'm curious, Natalie, maybe this is kind of to you as the storyteller. How do you decide some things, like which specific things we don't want to come into our not darkest timeline world? I guess, in my head immediately, I'm like, sure, let's not talk about COVID. Let's not talk about a current political climate, maybe. But like, are there specific events or people? I want to say people, I guess, because like I feel like there are people very important to the idea of storytelling and who have contributed to what could create a world for Monster of the Week. And like, I don't know. Does the question make sense? Kind of like, how do you decide which things that are like, well, this is like right on the edge, but we acknowledge that our story world still has some of these problems, and we do want the characters to be able to talk about them or experience them in some way.
Sure, right. I mean, any world needs conflict, or there's not going to be much of interest.
Or it's
to have the
Disneyland, and you're like,
characters.
here's the adventure of us walking around Disneyland.
Yep.
Look at Splash Mountain.
Whee!
And I mean, we specifically, part of our like core identity, because it was such a like vicarious escape initially, and a thing that we still try to incorporate now and then into episodes, is like moments of downtime and like slice of life, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, for 20 minutes, 30 minutes of this episode, we're just going to see what the characters do on their day off. We're going to see what they do when they actually get a second to decompress and talk to each other, or talk to a friend, or have friends outside of the hero group, right? And so, yeah, like that is a distinct thing that I think has sort of become important for us to maintain as part of our like identity as storytellers, is to include those moments alongside the really epic adventure and high drama, high stakes kind of encounters, and to give both, I don't even know that you could say equal weight, but like to value both and in different ways for different reasons, right?
Yes.
But as far as like what makes it into the world, what's allowed, right? A lot of that is dictated by the safety tools that we use. We have a constantly updating document of like, these topics we are not going to touch with the story.
Sure.
For whatever reasons, personal or otherwise, we don't want to include this in the types of challenges and the types of obstacles and difficulties that the characters are going to face. And then, like, so that's a thing. And then I also check in all the time. Like, in our more recent stuff, because of like the way the story has evolved and the way certain things have, transpired in the world, the landscape, and I say that meaning like the paradigm of this world, has shifted and changed to a point where now a lot of the fantastical elements are being slapped up against and used as an allegory for actual real world problems, or have very like near and easily comparable parallels. And so, when those things get a little too close, it's like, well, are we gonna do a story about this and like vaguely make a statement about this topic by having this be the way these events unfold? Or do we want to say, no, we're going to distance ourselves from that because we don't want to make, a thing there. And like, anything you say or don't say makes a statement, right? Our show at its core is intended to be, a thing that is fun to listen to, will make you feel emotions, a new thing I've been saying is you will cry tears of every kind listening to the Storyteller Squad. Right?
Love that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Brand identity. You should work on it, folks. It's great.
I hate
You
that
will
we have
cry,
to,
we
but
promise.
yes.
But you should. Yeah. No. And so, like, we are a heartfelt show. We are a show that wants to make you feel things and to feel familiar about the world, right? Like, the idea is that a lot of the things I draw on are from either lived experience or research into what a place is like, what an event is like, if I'm going to send the characters there or something. Or it's a relatable thing that people from all over can, say, oh, I did something like that with my friends one time, or I've been to a place like that. So it's a constantly evolving conversation, and it happens not just with like me and one player who's involved in that, but like the group of us, right? Like check-ins are happening constantly. It's the only way that a thing like this, this improvised group storytelling can survive and, overcome disagreements or different viewpoints and say like, well, I'm coming at it from this. Oh, I was coming at it from this direction. Oh, interesting. That means there's definitely room for different interpretations of the same exact events. So what do we want to come out of this, as the storytellers, not necessarily as the characters, but as the storytellers? What is the thing we're going to come away from this particular adventure feeling? Right? What are the things we want to leave the audience with so that they can sort of get a sense of, all right, now we'll move on. But I've had time to absorb what, TSS has to say about that.
Yeah.
So
we also have the benefit of being an edited podcast, and there have been times where we go through a scene or a storyline or something, and at the end of the session, maybe a couple days later, someone pops in our cast chat and is like, hey, I don't like how this shook out. I don't like what my character said about this. It didn't come out right. How do we feel about changing this? And we can get together and we can make some decisions and make it so that what we want to say is exactly what we want to say. And so there isn't any like fumbling or it's a nice benefit over like the live actual play where like once you say it, that's what it is and that's what happened.
What's happening. Everyone
we have
has
a little
heard it
more
and
time
or seen it. Totally.
Yeah, you can kind of ruminate on it and be like, hey, wait a minute, that's not what I meant.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate a lot. Like I talk a lot about managed expectations and consent, and the fact that you really need your whole table to opt in to the story you're telling, and you want people to know what they're getting into on some level, both your cast as a DM and your audience, So I really appreciate, I don't know. I really appreciate that being the response of like, no, it's not an executive decision by me on high as storyteller, but it is a conversation.
Yeah.
We kind of have this ongoing joke that we all just trust Natalie implicitly. Like she can, at this point, this far in, throw some really wild stuff at us and we will just roll with it. But it's because of these years of her checking in on us and checking with the whole group on certain themes and certain storylines or characters coming up. And so when she throws something really wild at us, we don't have to be afraid, because if it was something really bad or really scary, she would have checked in and be like, hey, how do you feel about your character dying?
Right.
Is that something you're okay with in this story?
Yeah. I need it for the narrative, but I also...
I just need to know.
Yeah. Well,
would you like
saying
a care package?
Need is a strong word. Yeah. I think before kind of asking some more general questions, the specific one I can think of, Brittany, is there a specific moment from, I realize I'm asking about 4 years of history, a moment or two that like really stand out to you as like, Natalie offered me a chance to make my character really grow, or just, I am so proud of this moment for me as a performer, for my character's step forward, just because it was fucking cool. Anything in that?
Ooh.
And
there's
I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, so like, yeah.
The first one that comes to mind is unfortunately like huge spoilers for the show. But so if you want to listen to the show, maybe skip the next little section. But Just speaking on, I wasn't kidding when I said Natalie reached out to all of us at one point and said, how do you feel about your character dying? Is that something you're okay with? We were coming up on a season finale.
Amazing.
And it was a little terrifying to receive the message, but we all answered honestly. And my answer at the time was, if it makes sense for the story, then yes. Like, if she has to die, she has to die. She will sacrifice herself for someone if she needs to. And there was a season finale where we had this amazing moment where her character, her DMPC, and mine, who are in a relationship, it's very cute.
So cute.
Love that.
It's so cute. My character had essentially been eaten by a godlike sea creature. She was stuck in an eel, but it was basically the abyss.
Sure.
And was dying. And we were like, emotions were running so high with the whole team. It was in the middle of a huge fight, and a lot of it was going really badly. And just being terrified as a player, but also having the complete like peace and confidence of like, if my character dies, she dies. And I know that it's going to be okay, and that the story's going to be rad as hell. And having this beautiful moment with both of our characters where they're kind of like not accepting their death, but like my character died in that moment, and having it be this amazing story beat, and just, I think all of us were crying. It was such a fantastic moment. It like really made me feel like a cast member and a storyteller on top of being like a D&D player and a TTRPG player. There's been moments like that in the show where you're all of those things. You're like a voice actor and just like an actor. We're all on camera with each other, and we're writing this story as it comes. We're improvising the most insane dialogue on the spot. But yeah, that was one of the most insane moments. And having everyone in the cast kind of had a similar moment in that same session. We each got our like a time to shine.
Well, Natalie, congratulations. That is not easy to do. I have tried. Jesus.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah. And Natalie, to you, I think, similar question. Are there like specific moments that you're very proud of as a storyteller, as the GM, as head person somewhat in charge of this wonderful collective?
Gosh. I mean, I am incredibly proud of all of it. Like it's one of those things where if I, for some reason, I'm in my podcast library and whatever I'm listening to like finishes, and then an episode of ours just like slips into the autoplay queue or whatever, I sometimes just let it go and I re-listen to an old session just because like I love doing this. I love this story. I love my cast and their characters so much. And like it's hard to pick favorites, but there are obviously like the big scenes, of like, well, this really made a difference in the story or things like that. I think my like favorite moments are the moments where I get to present those like big challenges or those, big moments to everyone and say like, this is happening. What do you do? And they surprise me back, or they take that and they might go completely the direction I expect, but their performance and the way they react emotionally to it just hits a lot harder than I was expecting, or hits as hard and just as good. And it's just like, yes, exactly. I knew you would follow through on this, right? Like, I knew if I gave this cast member this moment, they would shine as a performer and their character would get this incredible beat in the story, right?
It's a badge of honor to make Natalie cry, especially when she had the scene in her head and this is what she wanted, and we do it so well she cries. It's very special. We're usually also crying.
I feel like everyone needs like little badges. Right?
I made my DM cry, smiley face.
Yeah, totally.
She was okay with it.
It's like it'd be a good like scout badge. Like we need new little like RPG scouts instead of Boy Scouts or whatever the fuck.
That'd be so good.
And you just made my DM cry.
Yeah.
Heart.
Yeah. So I mean, like season finales are always fun. The end of arcs are always fun. We have there's one arc in our third season that has sort of become the like thing I point people at if I'm like trying to showcase like here's what you can expect from this show, right? Like in terms of both the cast's performance, my post-production, my GMing style, like and so like it's the ending of that particular episode. I want to say it's 77. It's called The Cost. You know, but it is a scene that I have like edited multiple times to both like cut down for submissions to Webfests and things like that this year. Just because I think it is such an amazing snippet of like the very authentic and genuine like character to character types of interactions that can happen. And then the like broad, sweeping, exciting, epic, ensemble work that happens when a scene is going and characters are popping off and talking to each other and there's dialogue and I'm describing and there's music and sound effects and wow, impact, right? Like I when I am producing the episodes, I am longing for that moment when I like get to hit play after adjusting sound levels and volume and everything and just let a scene go. And in my head, it is like the animated series happening and I can just like feel the little, chills like, oh, there it is. We did it. Okay.
Yeah.
Then,
one of the things that I am loving so much is how far y'all are from GM versus players stereotypes.
Yes.
And this is also something like we've talked about before that like this is where I'm like, I try not to tell people, oh, you're DMing wrong or you're doing it wrong. Because I'm like, everyone likes something different. Some people fucking want to micromanage their crossbow bolts and like their rations and have to set up camp every night, whatever the fuck. And but the time that I'm like, no, that is wrong, is the people that seem to have this attitude of like, I, the DM, the GM, am trying to beat my players.
Yeah,
And
if it's you
like,
versus your players and your players versus you, you're playing it wrong. Unless everybody is all down for that, then I guess technically it's right.
And like,
but only if
and I think-
everyone wants that. And most of the time they don't.
Everyone loses. Yeah, totally. Or, again, manage expectations. We're like, hey, I'm going to run fucking Tomb of Horrors from the 80s. So 9 million traps. And actually, if you run it as it is written multiple times, where if you walk through the wrong, magically lit up gateway, you reappear at the beginning naked with none of your equipment and none of your gear and none of your clothing. And it's all been put at the final chamber of the tomb somewhere with the Demi-Lich. And you're like,
rude.
It's like, this is DM versus players right here. So yeah, but I love how collaborative the Storyteller Squad is and how it feels to me like, Natalie, you go out of your way to make sure that your whole cast is on board and coming along the train with you and getting to helping to decide where it's going.
For sure. And there's two things, right, to say about that. One being, it has to be because it is a game, but we are a show, right?
Yeah.
Like we are a cast, not just a GM and her players. We are a production, not just a home game with friends, right? So there is an element of, well, if we didn't have fun with this, the audience certainly won't, and that's not good for anybody, right? We are beholden really to ourselves and like the standard that we want to set for what does our story look like. And that, because it involves everyone's input, it has always been my feeling that like, well, I don't get final say beyond like the edit. And then if someone like, God forbid, had an issue with like something that happened in session, we handle that before it even hits the record, like the editing stage of stuff, right? But then the second bit where it comes down to like GM versus player, like now my prejudice is going to show a little bit, but like, I think that comes down to, in some cases, or it's like influenced a lot by game design, period. Right? Monster of the Week is like you could certainly run Monster of the Week in a GM versus players mentality, and like it has the bones to do that, I guess. But like, unlike D&D, which is you solve problems by fighting stuff because that's what the rules facilitate the best.
It is a combat simulator at its heart and at its core.
It's
that's
a combat
what it was
engine.
built
It
for.
came from wargaming. It is about simulating, the violent conflict that can be epic and heroic. And if you allow space in between those moments for exploration, interaction, role play, etc., you can space that out. But like, most of the rules, if you look in the books, are like, here's what happens if you throw this at an enemy. Here's how this thing fails and does damage, etc. Whereas like Monster of the Week, half the rules are, here's how you investigate. Here's how your DM will share information. Here's a rule where you get to tell the DM something. Here's where you earn these points to let you affect the narrative. Right? And there are games up and down the spectrum with even less rules than Monster of the Week and even more rules than D&D. And I think the like that adversarial mentality, it doesn't work for games that are going to be turned into entertainment, period. It can work for home games because sometimes you just want to sit down and you want to have someone, be the AI
Throw monsters at
of
you.
the monster, right? Like, I'm scheduled to be in a game where I'm going to get to fight Tiamat with like 20 other players. And that's the whole point of it, is just, we want to just fight this big dragon. That's going to be cool. But like that's a very different goal than to say, I want to have a campaign about a world that feels like ours, but is more magical and lasts however long our show is going to go for, like.
Yeah, totally. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your mid-roll. It is I, your host, Colin, here to thank you once again for listening. It is so nice and so important, and it feels so good that you are here with us. And also to remind you that if you never want to hear me say that again, if you just are excited about the show, if you love what we're doing, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/therollreport, where also, for as little as a single $1 a month, you can submit questions for our interview guests. Only our friends and supporters on Patreon can submit questions, and only they will get to hear the answers. We've got some really incredible guests coming up as usual, and if you want to hear their answers to your questions, head on over to Patreon. Also, you can follow us on social media. We are at The Roll Report Cast on Instagram and TikTok, and now on Blue Sky. Ooh. Follow us there for announcements about upcoming guests once they have been booked, and then you will find out if you have interesting and amazing and unusual questions for all of them. But thank you so much for listening. That's really all. We are so grateful you're here with us and hope you are enjoying this episode. Back to the show. Well, I feel like this is also a perfect segue for me to ask what your favorite systems are and a little bit about why. I'm going to go out on a limb and say for maybe both of you, it's not D&D at this point. But I'm curious what it is. And I as someone who I have experience with like 5 or 6 games, and I know people that are like, oh yeah, I bought the 100 game bundle on itch and I played every single one of them in the last year and a half. So open question, what is your favorite system to play? I love the thoughtful silence. It means I asked something good.
It's tough.
Yeah. Like the easy answer is to say my favorite's Monster of the Week, obviously, but it's I wouldn't even say that. Like my favorite system is the Powered by the Apocalypse 2d6 and the like success and failure scale that comes with, and that carries across a bunch of different games.
Yes,
right, with that all have different like supplementary rules tacked on, but that system I find personally I prefer over like a D20 based single roll type of result.
And I do think that was the thrust of the questions. Like, I know Powered by the Apocalypse powers 9 million games. And it's because I think it's such a versatile system that you add a rule or two on for your flavor of what you're trying to get to, but its basic versatility is really, really high.
And like dice pool systems can be fun as well. We have experience with 7th Sea, which I really enjoyed. But I enjoyed that game more for other elements of its rule set as like more so than like the rolling mechanic. Which is fine. Like, I don't have anything against it. It's just, for me, I like the ease of, there's an obstacle, make a check. Okay, that check has a range rather than a set number it has to hit. To like break things down to their very core elements, right? Or if you wanted to say like, there's die systems where it's like technically a pool, but it's a pool of 2. Like I think the new Daggerheart rules is like you roll 2 dice, and whatever number is higher is the one. I don't remember. I haven't had a chance to play Daggerheart, but
it's one on my list of like I got to investigate.
Yeah, but like
more
their
about
system
this.
is based on 2 die, and the like color of the die indicates one value, and the other one's the opposite, and both of those things can affect the story. It seems interesting. I want to try it. Let's see. We've there's like dice pools where you're trying to like reach a certain value on the faces and only those count towards things. There's certain ones where you're trying to pair them to match or to like add up to certain numbers, and how many times you can do that as your results. Like that's all fine. But yeah, I like a scale, and I like a scale that already built within that scale has some instruction about, well, this could mean this, but it doesn't always, right? The big thing I tell people, or that I have like, sometimes I had to remind myself, and I try to really like hammer it home in play and in our game, is that like, even fail results, quote unquote fail, like there's not really a fail, it's a miss. And you might get exactly what you want, but something narrative bad is going to come as a result of this, which to me makes it feel more like a storytelling system than like a gaming system. Because the result is not locked, it is informed.
Right.
With that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, awesome.
Yeah. Brittany?
And Brittany, over to you.
Honestly, I feel like my answer is very similar. I started just like rolling through all of the games that I've played recently, or even just the ones that I enjoy hearing other people play. I haven't been listening to a lot of actual play podcasts lately, but I used to be into them like a couple of years ago. And I think most of them are generally powered by the apocalypse. I like the simplicity of the rolling and how it doesn't like grind the whole story to a halt every single time you have to roll to do something. It just is one roll. It's an easy calculation. It's an easy answer of like, did I miss? Am I in the middle, or did I succeed? And then immediately moving on. The dice pool systems were cool. I liked 7th Sea, but I think my favorite parts about our 7th Sea campaign were the characters and the role playing that we did. And the dice pool stuff really stressed me out. Because I never quite felt like I got it. And I was always afraid that I was not being like efficient about adding up my dice to meet 10, and then I had too many left over. And as someone who has a lot of anxiety about doing math quickly, it's nice to just roll 2d6 and add a couple of numbers, and it's so easy.
I do think it's one of the early times that I noticed editing happening in any actual play. Like my tastes are more on D&D, but not exclusively. But like, I remember early on, I was listening probably to NADPOD or something. I'm like, wait a minute. There's no way you added up 8 D8s plus your modifier plus another few D4s.
Because no one wants to listen to it. You just cut it.
It's hilarious. Some people don't. Some people, there's totally like, you hear like, okay, it's 5, 7, 12, another 6 is 18. And, but it was so funny to be like, oh, that is really judicious editing to like take out people doing math on a mic.
And then if you take that out for the whole session and it's happened 42 times, you're saving so much time.
I think this is how D&D Minus gets their episodes down to like 40 minutes flat, and I'm like, there's no way that's how long you're playing. There's no fucking way.
You just take out the rolling. But
Yeah.
I like that Powered by the Apocalypse stuff is less rolling, it's more role play, and you can roll more than we do. We tell people all the time, there's some sessions that maybe one person will roll once. The rest of it is just collaborative storytelling and character stuff.
Yeah.
You can roll dice more in Monster of the Week if you want to, but you don't have to. And I really, like Natalie said, I really enjoy that when you don't roll high enough, it's not just like, oh, you don't do the thing, or like, oh, you slip and fall and you look stupid and you don't do the thing. It's, well, maybe you did the thing, but something else bad happens. And hey, you gained experience from this. And if you fail enough times, you level up and you get better at stuff so that you might fail at it less next time. Yeah. Instead of just, there's been times when you're either playing D&D or you're listening to it and it's like, oh, the door's locked. All right, well, I rolled to unlock the door. I failed. Well, let me try. I rolled to unlock the door. I failed. Everyone in the party has to roll to unlock the door. We've spent 25 minutes at this locked door and no one's been able to open it. Like, can we please just get through this door? If it's Monster of the Week, maybe it just took you a couple extra minutes and you still get through and then the story moves on. Yeah. Or more likely, you didn't even roll to unlock the door because you have the character who's really good at lockpicking. Just do it.
And they have lockpicks and
this is what they're good at. And the story says they just do it. And then you get through the door and the story continues and everyone has fun.
I mean, honestly, this makes me want to play Monster of the Week more because it's one of the, no, I agree. Like, I think that when your every action requires a dice roll and a flat zero-sum success or failure, it has the potential to get in the way of storytelling.
Yeah.
I do think like making your party try a locked door 75 times is like kind of a failure of imagination on the DM's part.
Yes.
More than
sometimes it turns into a bit and it's fine and it's funny, but it's just like the one example I can think of like, please, can we just
100%.
keep going?
Yeah, there's nowhere else to go.
It becomes the difference of like, are you as a GM trying to be a physics engine or are you trying to be a director?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or a cinematographer or, God forbid, a storyteller.
And again, as long as everyone's having fun, it's okay. Yeah. If that's what your players want is to roll dice for every single action, then amazing. Like, don't not do that.
And we have systems for that.
Yes.
Yeah. You can also run D&D and not ask for checks. Like, you know, it's in the rules. Like, you don't, there's nothing in the rules that says like, if the door is locked, they must succeed on, it's like, that's if you make them check. But you can.
That's if you choose to lock the door.
Yeah, in any system, and this I think is I want to say this is like a philosophy I picked up from Burning Wheel and like the writings from that writer whose name escapes me. And like just how to run games, not necessarily within any system, but like how to generally GM well, is to say that like if a character could reasonably do a thing, let them reasonably do a thing. Let them be good at the thing their character is supposed to be, so that when they struggle, like that feels more, it raises the stakes. Those are the moments of tension. Or if, you have something that you've planned and you have 3 hours to play, you want to get to the thing you planned. So why put unnecessary obstacles in the path? Sure, if the logic of the narrative would dictate that, like, okay, well, you're going to have to sneak past the guards, and they're going to have to scale this wall, and they're going to have to do this thing. But, like, if you don't want to spend an hour making them do all those checks, and what you're really excited and all your players are really excited about is getting into the throne room to, like, confront the evil king, just montage it and get there and start having fun faster, because no one's gonna come, like, Matt Mercer's not gonna kick your door down and be like, you didn't make him put on the wall, like, no one cares.
No one cares. Well, and the thing that I think is forgotten about the most is that, like, page 1 of DM's guide says these are guidelines. You as the DM can decide what you're doing and how you want to do it. And, like, myself, I'm like, man, we've been doing a series on the 2024 updates to the rules and to the classes specifically, and I'm like, man, some of this is hot garbage. Some of this is cold garbage, not even hot. And I don't want to use it. But then like specific example, the 2024 a bard's counter charm is now actually fucking useful. And so I'm like, hey, if you're playing a bard, we can totally play the 2014 rules, but also you can use that thing that makes this ability actually make fucking sense. And it's because I say so.
Yeah. It also leaves more space in the story for character stuff. I feel like a lot of times when you're doing too many checks, it makes character stuff feel really arbitrary of like, well, why did they screw up that really easy thing they'd normally not have an issue with? Like, and you have to kind of just make up a reason or everyone just ignores it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're only doing checks when it's really necessary, then maybe this character is really good at unlocking doors all the time, but now something's going on in their life and this time they're having trouble with it. And it becomes a character choice and it becomes part of the story and the narrative. And everyone can be like, hey, why is that character struggling right now? Instead of like, well, 50% of the time they don't get it because they roll bad. You know,
Right.
it
Because
just
that's-
allows you more creativity as characters instead of kind of pigeonholing you into like, why did that happen? Well, I rolled bad. Or I did this really stupid impossible thing as a joke because I rolled a 20 and it worked.
Yeah.
You know, so I could fly for 5 minutes. And we just have to kind of explain that away for no reason.
Oh man. I'm curious if either or both of you think that any of the systems or games that you've experienced are better or worse suited for this goal of collaborative storytelling. I'm going to say it seems fairly obvious that like Monster of the Week is very, very well suited to this, or you wouldn't have stuck with it for so long. But are there ones that you feel are like very well or very poorly suited to this? And like, you know, honestly, I can say I don't actually think that D&D is always the best storytelling system. It's good at crunching numbers and doing the things, and it's a great combat engine, I guess. But like its ability to tell a story relies so heavily on the group playing it. And really on, I think, more than maybe some other systems, on the DM to lead that story. So, Brittany, systems or games that are like particularly well or poorly suited to collaborative storytelling.
I will say that I think D&D works at this point for storytelling because it is so familiar that it makes a really good like gateway into actual plays. I feel like most people I know started listening to actual plays because of D&D.
Yeah.
And it's also when I talk to people about our show, if they don't really know anything about the gaming world, I usually ask them, do you know what D&D is? And if they say yes, I say, I play D&D. You know, like it's a different game, but it's basically D&D. So I have a lot of respect and a lot of nostalgia for D&D, and I don't think it's a bad game, but you do have to be so specific about how you play in order for it to work for your story. I think the best kinds of games for storytelling like ours is more rules light or rules flexible. Like we've said, there's a lot of stuff in Monster of the Week that we don't utilize as often as maybe a home game would, but Monster of the Week works in that way that we don't need to. There's a lot of stuff in our game that we kind of just ignore because it doesn't work for our storytelling style, and that's great.
Yeah.
So you need a game that has a lot of space for your story and your characters and a lot of flexibility to just be like, no, we're not doing that. But hey, I came up with a home rule that we all really like. Let's use that instead.
Yeah.
Or like you said, kind of cherry picking the new rules and the old rules of whatever works best for you. And I like that Powered by the Apocalypse is so flexible that I've played in one-shots with some of our friends on other Monster of the Week shows where it's a Powered by the Apocalypse system. And so they can kind of gather a bunch of friends who all play different Powered by the Apocalypse games and be like, here's a reskinned game. You guys kind of know the rules, but it's in this theme. Make a character.
You know
and
the
we'll all
dice
play
to
together.
roll. You just got to like learn a little bit of the specifics.
It's really easy to jump in instead of like, here's a book, read the whole thing. Your character sheet is incomprehensible to you. Like, good luck. Let's play.
Yeah.
So obviously we're biased with Monster of the Week, but
Sure.
anything,
but
anything
I think
light
it's a very
on the
valid
rules.
answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
It's so flexible and versatile is the word that I want. It's so versatile.
Cool. Natalie, same question.
I think like, yes, echoing all that, but I think like, I don't know. I've been very introspective lately about like what it is we are doing with like making a storytelling show and using games as the engine of that, right? Like
Yeah.
it is I think less important for me what system is being used, and that like the actual things that make right a storytelling series or a production or just any sort of collaborative like art media work are things like team communication and like time away from the actual doing to discuss the doing, right? And
Yeah.
like when you first asked like what do you think is like the best game for doing this type of thing, and I was like, I think the game that the people play like doing the thing are most comfortable
Yeah.
with, you know, like if
And the one
you-
they
if-
like the best.
or the one they like the best, or
Sure.
yeah, like or the one that they decide is going to be the thing that they want to use, right? Like there is no. You will have to talk to some game developers to try and like quantify the inherent value of certain game systems. But like talking to me and us and like our cast as a bunch of storytellers who use gaming as one of our tools, I don't think like we place a sort of higher or lower numeric or even like quantifiable value onto systems, because it's just like, well, if we were trying to do XYZ, we definitely want to use Monster of the Week. But if we're gonna shift gears and go over to like ABC territory, then it's like Monster of the Week might not be the thing, right?
Yeah.
We're experimenting right now with a new game and a new like approach to storytelling, period. Which is just like so
it's a really good time to start listening to the Storyteller Squad.
It's a really
You
good
should
time to maybe think about being a patron. We're gonna
time to think
release
about
this,
supporting this incredible show.
Yeah, we're gonna release it as a Patreon thing first and see how it's received. But yeah, it's so we've been sort of moving beyond the scope of like, oh, what game are we gonna play? And I'm starting to think more like, well, we need to pick a game, but like, what is the type of story we're gonna tell? Like there's a bunch of games that I've been slowly working my way through just reading to like get the tone and the feel. And like Wild Sea from MythWorks is such a like game that is so about embracing the premise that they give you in that book of like, here's a lot of lore. And if you have a bunch of players or a cast who are really able to like absorb lore and then want to iterate on it, that's a fantastic system. I don't think I've gotten to the like mechanics section of the book yet. So I don't know how it plays, but I just know that like if we were going to do anything with it, those would be the things that would come first. Is like, does everyone like this premise, and does everyone feel like they could take those ideas and sort of spiderweb out into, you know, the creativity side of this? There's another system, I think also published under MythWorks, but with different writers, called Last Caravan, which is a sort of post-alien invasion road trip story where the aliens have not won, but nor did humanity. And so you are like wandering this earth in like a post-War of the Worlds situation where like the invasion didn't go as planned. And
now there's this,
but like it still messed everything up, you know? And so like, so it's like, okay, well, so how, like, what is the goal of that story, right? It's very open-ended, and they give you a lot more lore and things, but it's like, but what type of story do we want to tell about that experience, right?
Well, I think something that you hit on that I want to reinforce is how important the people you're telling the story are. And both for everyone to have a good time and be invested, and that ultimately like whatever system you're using is in service of that. I think especially as performers, you know, home game, do whatever you want, hope that your friends are having a good time and everyone's along for the ride. But when you are creating something that you want other people to experience, having everyone on board with that is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had half of a thought and then I lost it. Yeah. I think on that note, I have like a couple questions I kind of want to ask about your experiences in the larger community and then, ask our extremely, extremely important question of your favorite character class and subclass. It's the most important question we ask in the interview. That's why we save it for the end.
Yeah.
I think the question, what is your experience like in this community, is far too open-ended and broad. But I think the focus that I want to ask is how you feel received and seen by some of the larger community. Like, obviously, we hope our audience covers a wide swath, but I think a lot of storytelling is for other storytellers. And so, I think the question is like, how do you feel received and seen by people in the community as you've been going, as the whole cast has gone to PAX East and things, how that's been for you? Either whoever wants it, take the ball and run.
I would say overall, it's been good. And I would say with not the caveat, but with the like preface that Natalie has done so much work ahead of the rest of the cast, kind of jumping into the like larger community, that in a lot of places where the rest of us have shown up, it's been like, oh, you're from the Storyteller Squad, Natalie. And so we have gotten a very nice reception in a lot of spaces because of the work that she has done to like just walk up to people and introduce herself and pitch the show and be a nice person that people want to work with. Like doing that work of just being genuine and being nice goes a long way.
I mean, flat out one of the nicest and friendliest people I met at Big Bad, like hands down. It was just like, oh my God, you're so cool. I don't feel cool enough to hang, but I'm going to try.
But like
and
overall,
looking utterly fabulous while doing it.
Oh yeah. That's she like set a standard for us when we go to cons. Like we all have to look good and also obviously be really nice to everybody. But overall, the gaming community has been very nice. It has its downfalls. It has its cliques. Sure. It has its like inter-party conflicts and stuff. There's always some kind of drama going on with some people in it. But overall, it's been welcoming. But that's also from my perspective of being a white woman. And so especially working for a gaming company, it always felt very welcoming because I was selling things to nerds with money and they all wanted to talk to me.
Yeah.
And so it was welcoming, but also with kind of a weird, not sinister, but weird vibes of like, oh, you want me here, but not because you're interested to hear in my like D&D character opinions.
Yeah.
But I do think it's gotten better. Certainly in the last like 5 or 10 years, obviously there's way more people who play D&D and it's not just white men, which is great.
It's not just the like 50-year-old white men. They're like, hey man, when I started playing, all drow were evil fucks and you could kill all the orcs. And you're like,
like we've come a long way.
That's fucked up, right? Yeah.
There will always be more to go, but it is nice to look back and be like, well, hey, this is pretty cool that we're like an openly queer-led show and with a cast of a bunch of femmes and trans people and queer people and like people seem to like us and that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I think like thank you both for the little compliment sesh. I feel like I should start with that. Yeah, like
of course.
It is true that I sort of dove in ahead of, bringing the rest of my cast along. Either, gently by the hand or kicking and screaming. You can ask them individually.
Sure.
But what I can say about my early days were that like many people are very nice, and a small handful who I am lucky to have met and befriend are very generous. This is a competitive industry, whether you're talking about podcasting, exhibiting, TTRPG content creation, like general internet popularity across platforms, etc.
TTRPG game development,
Yep.
which is like side by side with all of it.
Yeah.
So, there is some money to be made, but not infinite money to be made, because like as much as it feels like our entire world, we have to remember that it is a very small microcosm of the human experience still, even with how big D&D is, right? Like billions of dollars, but it's like, but how many people in your life do you actually know who play or engage in gaming? And it's like a percentage. It's never like everyone you know, unless you have cut everyone else out of your life for some reason.
Yeah, and out of those people, how many of them are like actively monetarily supporting
professionals,
other people in
like
the gaming
doing,
space?
Making this their whole thing. So, but all that being said, I will admit and welcome the compliment that I have this sort of easy charm about me, which I do think comes from like a genuine desire to both create cool, creative, artistic things and share them, and to make friends and work with people who are my friends. Which has always been a thing. Like, I think, like I'm trying to think, like, where did that start? Like, well, I did theater in high school, and like my high school's theater department was the whole school. Like, there were the quote unquote cliques, but everyone did theater, right? People on the soccer team, people on football team, like they were in the plays doing that stuff or doing crew or whatever. So like I have always felt a connection to community and teamwork, I think inherently, and also just informed by my experiences. In college, it was very much a band of illustrators trying to get better and, wanting to make cool images that inspired each other. And then when I joined the cosplay community and then LARPing, like it's always been this thing where I go to places and I try and find my people who share my drive and my desire to create, and to do so like wholeheartedly and genuinely. And so by doing that, we have made many friends and colleagues, and for the most part avoided like, issues or conflicts, because like I'm not in it for like the quick buck or like the instant fame or anything like that. Like I just want to reach a point where we can do this and sustain ourselves doing it, because once it gets to that point, like I don't, obviously like the dream or the goals will change, but I don't know what else I would want, right? Like that to be fulfilled in what you do and to do it with people you love, I think is honestly one of like the biggest gifts you can achieve or strive for yourself. So that's been my experience, is that like by approaching it with that motivation in like core whatever, like it attracts like-minded people who are also success or whatever variances of, but you find like instant community and friendship because they understand it. If like generally I have found people who are still around or stick around are doing it for those reasons, and so they understand what that struggle and that sacrifice is like. I was speaking to a friend of ours who is another exhibitor, and it's like we were just discussing the like, if you want a 9-to-5 and stability, you can have that. If you want what we have, you're going to give up stability, but you get fulfillment. Whoa, which one's better? Like, who knows?
I resonate with this so strongly. Like, I think, I got into this in a similar place. It was like, I want to tell great stories with my friends, and I have been lucky enough to meet really incredible like-minded people.
Yeah.
And then get to spend an hour and a half talking to them about like whatever they're most excited about, which is always gives me great joy.
Yeah. So like I think in terms of what the community it has been a real privilege and an honor to like become a member of it in a way that now feels very tangible. Right? We have reached a point now where we show up to shows and we have our space and people go, they arrive and they're like, "You have a booth? You're here? You're doing it?" And it's like,
I love that.
Yeah. And there's no like jealousy.
So cool.
There's no like, oh my gosh, they must have pulled some. It's like, wow.
Yeah. From other peers, other shows, other businesses
like,
will come up and say, "Congratulations, you guys. I can't believe you have a booth that looks amazing." Instead of, scoffing at or like, "Oh, this is competition."
Walking up and going like, nice booth. Shame about the, whatever. And you're like,
like the community
take your
is
backhanded compliment and fuck off.
Small, even though it feels humongous sometimes, like Natalie said, it really is so tiny that there's no point in seeing these people as like the competition. Like these are your peers. Like we came into this podcasting world and immediately found a bunch of other Monster of the Week podcasts. And instead of being like, "Oh, screw them, we want their fans," Natalie reached out and now we're friends with all of them. And they're amazing people because they're doing what we're doing, which is telling stories with their friends and playing a game that we play. It's like, why wouldn't you want to make friends with these people and work together on stuff and make cool things? Because that's why we're all here.
Yeah.
And if one of you sees some success, you pull your friends up so that when you get success, you pull them up. And it just, I feel like that's been such a core value of ours for a long time is when something good happens, you bring your friends with you. So that way everybody gets to move up together instead of like stepping on people to get to the top.
Yes.
And I think
because then there's no point.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a mentality of like, rising tide and like reach down, reach laterally, reach up all at once. And you will feel yourself begin to be supported by the people in those positions. And I think it's like, it's definitely a responsibility that I've been like reflecting on it and taking very seriously of like, as we get up there, like what are the, like to look at both your peers and also the people who have like reached an echelon above and to say like, what is their attitude? How do they handle certain challenges when huge, dramatic events happen within the community? What are these people's reactions? Do they react? What strategies or what decisions are they being asked to make?
Sure.
And then you end up in those positions, you're like, we have to make a similar kind of decision. What do we do? And I think having mentors and friends to look to and ask about advice and on those sorts of things is really helpful.
You've got kind of a roadmap for some of those things.
Yeah. And like it if there are like for anyone in this space, if you ever feel slighted or you feel like, oh, like I met this person, but they're like too famous to give me the time of day or to remember me. It's like, it's not a personal thing. Your ability to engage changes with where you are, right? When you are fresh and new, you want to engage with everyone. When you've been at it for 4 or 5 years, you want to engage with everyone who you sense has the same amount of drive and is going to stick around because your time becomes more valuable and you've been patient and you've put the time in to work on and craft a thing. And if you meet a dozen people and only 2 of them really have, the fire in their heart to want to take it and go the distance, then like you're going to be a little more selective about like, well, they seem like they've got a kindred spirit going on here where like I can see in them what I was like at that stage in my journey. And like looking forward, you can kind of project, without being totally accurate, but like the resources aren't infinite. even people you look to and you're like, they have all this money. It's like, they have all that money, but they have structures they have to support with it now. They have commitments to things. They have contracts. They have legalities to dodge and dance around. And
actual employees.
Who are depending on them and the decisions they make to, maintain the stability they are giving those people, right? Like, if you suddenly become the source of that stability, like, oh boy, you're going to change how you interact. And, so like, I try to think of it as, I look at the community and I see a lot of people wanting success for everyone involved, because gaming as an activity and storytelling as an art form is so primally like healing and necessary for people. And I don't think you choose to pursue that professionally unless you really strongly feel that and also like want that for everyone involved. I don't know. I've been on a real community
that is an
reflection
incredible
kick,
answer. Yes.
lately.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think it's important. I think it's important to reflect the communities that you're a part of, reflect on the communities you're a part of, and what have they given me? What can I give back? And how can we all make them better, as it might be? On such an amazing note, I do want to ask you the most important question.
Let's do it.
Best two questions. So, and I think what I want to say is like we asked this about D&D, but I'm curious if you by this point, if you're like, oh, I have a favorite monster of the week, I guess archetype, I think is more the language I want to use there. But starting with D&D, Brittany, I'm going to come to you first. What is your favorite character class?
Oh, I usually default to rogue, with the caveat that I am not super good at it at high levels because it becomes complex. But in the low levels, it's very fun. And it's I've played it just enough times that I feel like I can jump into it fairly easily.
Yeah. I think rogues are super fun. I think that is interesting that you say that, because I sometimes steer newer players towards rogues when I'm like, oh, I know we're only, it's a low level, it's a one shot, we're only getting up to like 8 or 9 and you're going to be fine. And you're right, like a lot of their complex stuff starts coming in as you hit like reliable talent at 11 and like further on.
You're keeping track of a lot of stuff.
And rolling a ton of D6s if you hit. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, but in those lower levels, it's a blast.
Totally.
Natalie, over to you.
God, I have been thinking about this since you posed
Multiple
the question.
answers are acceptable.
Well, it like...
You're the queen of like multi-classing.
I know.
Some crazy shit.
I always multi-class a little bit because I'm looking for like bits and pieces of each of my favorites. Like if I had to give like top 4, it's probably like cleric, warlock, and then like fighter, paladin. I think.
That is a really interesting and like very like oppositional group in this way.
Yeah. So
but if you heard some of her characters, it would all make sense.
And like monk is in there sometimes.
I was really surprised you didn't say monk. I feel like that's number 5.
One of my longest running characters is a Sun Soul monk, Aasimar. She started that way. Now she's like got some levels of cleric. I like subclasses, especially in D&D, that right at the like onset of character creation, you already have a mandatory relationship with another entity in the world.
Totally.
Right? So warlock, cleric, paladin, boom. You have something bigger than you that your character is tied to and that informs a lot of the decisions and the flavor of your character and like what their abilities look like.
It's immediately great windows into the story, into the world that you're
creating. It sets up dynamics of both tension and allyship with other characters and NPCs. Those 3 are up there for that reason. But this is also why I prefer playing things like Tiefling, Aasimar, Ganassi, like extra planar attachments because of that reason too. However, human fighter. Like, My first character,
just the versatility is hard to argue with.
You get so many ASIs, which you can then spend on feats. So there's a lot of customization that can happen with human fighter. Like, and there's just something like really appealing and like I don't know, like basic human wish fulfillment of like, what if I was just super fit and as good as this person who can summon meteors? Like, viably in like the way that D&D measures ability.
What if I could punch something 15 times in 6 seconds?
Okay, quick tangent, and then actually question tangent first.
Sure.
I'm curious, Natalie, if you have if you have played and loved Pathfinder's character creation for this reason. And as someone who's not played, but has like built characters, what I noticed is, I guess also going back to kind of D&D 3.5 and in Pathfinder 1 and 2, your customization and how you can really craft the way the character works and who they are and their backstory is so much greater when you have access to like all of the feats and the things from other classes. So yeah, I think that is maybe the short answer. Like, yes, I love that, or no, I have no idea, or no, I hate it.
I haven't played Pathfinder. Pathfinder is from an era of like RPG rules where the crunch sort of got in the way of me wanting to engage.
Yeah, fair.
Because like, yes, I totally recognize that Pathfinder's like ability to customize like that can be an appeal. But when you say like, what's your build gonna be? And the answer is, well, just whatever you want from the rule book. It's like, I need focus. I need some kind of limitation, or I'm just going to make an adult dragon. Like,
well, I mean,
right?
Why,
like, why would you stop at, character ability? Like when you're just like, it's everything. Like, okay.
Yeah. My other quick tangent, Brittany, to your point, like I'm remembering very vividly and viscerally a period a few years ago when my housemate was like, oh, your classical comics education is lacking. And so I read the entire X-Men Age of Apocalypse arc, which, small spoilers, and if you haven't read it by now, what the fuck is wrong with you if you call yourself an X-Men fan? I don't know. So like, there's all this buildup. There's so much buildup, how terrible Apocalypse is, and like Magneto is the hero in this universe. And there's so many amazing things that X-Men have done, so many powers, so many abilities that they've developed and invented. And then what it comes down to is Magneto punching Apocalypse really hard. That's all it comes down to. He just punches him in the belly really fucking hard with magnets or something. It was like, man, what a fucking letdown, honestly. But to be the human fighter that can punch a god, I'm here for it. Why not?
Just be so good at fighting
the whole way. Yeah.
No magic, no nothing. Just good at punching.
Just so
good
fit.
At punching.
The ultimate nerd dream.
Right?
Getting 8 hours of sleep every night.
Friends. You're doing great.
Fit nerd friends. We love our fit nerd friends. Okay. So Brittany, coming back to you for favorite subclass, if you have one, or multiple. Multiple are always acceptable.
You know, I feel like my D&D knowledge is lacking enough that I don't know if I have an answer.
Legit. Then rephrasing to, do you have a favorite Monster of the Week archetype? And sub-question, is it in fact the archetype that you are playing, or is it like someone else on the cast, or like a different thing that you played outside?
You know, I
know nothing about this answer, I'm so curious.
Do have an answer for this, and it's honestly funny how similar it is to Natalie's thing about fighters. And I think my favorite playbook in Monster of the Week is the Mundane, which is the person with no magic at all, who like can't engage with magic and just has no magical powers, and is just the Mundane is like just a guy. Yeah. But their playbook has so much in there that ends up being really powerful for the story and the mystery that makes it so much fun, that you can have like a werewolf and a witch and a ghost, and then there's just a guy, and the guy can Fred be with his really hatchet, good.
Just like
there's so much good stuff there that you don't have to do any magic or any spooky stuff or anything. You're just someone who's like really good at getting yourself into trouble. You always manage to find the stuff that's going wrong, and you learn a lot about it on the way.
I love that.
Yeah. I mean,
And that is not the playbook that my character plays. I don't think I've ever played the mundane. I maybe played one in like a very brief one shot with a friend, like not for the show. But yeah, I just think it's really fun, and I'm really glad that it's included in the game with so much cool supernatural stuff.
I think it's so important to have the every person perspective. If
the
you
human
will.
fighter, the just a guy.
I mean, to pull it back around to like what we were talking about at the beginning, where like, you were saying like, I didn't really like put a lot of like extra layers between me and my character for the campaign. It's like, yeah, but that became so important, right?
Yeah.
Like Brittany's character in the show, especially like as it really solidified into a show and like the party dynamic kind of came together, was like she served as the audience's eye into this world where everyone else in the party had like a thing that made them weird or made them stand out, or like they had these pre-existing connections that we would play off of. But like Brittany's character Raven was this girl from this small town that we started in who gets thrust into this huge adventure with these friends that she made, but all of them
she
were
discovers
already sort of
she has
there.
magic powers as part of like the first or second arc.
Cool.
It's as part of the story. Like before that, she wasn't anything magical.
It really makes that
cool.
type of character sometimes feel like the heart or the glue that keeps the party together, because otherwise people's outside of the hero group connections can start to try and pull them apart. You need that person that's like, no,
she's
like,
there because these are her friends and she cares about them, and not so much like this higher purpose of like the end game of the story. She's just here to help make the world a better place because her friends are and because she believes in it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right, Natalie, favorite subclass or subclasses?
Oh goodness.
We're getting a list. Okay, I'm here for it.
I think I have to say Sun Soul Monk is up there. It's very fun to play an anime character.
100%.
And like it's not technically rules as written, but there's a warlock subclass that I think they ended up calling like Deep One or whatever, like the Pact with the Deep thing or whatever.
Wait, Fathomless?
Maybe that's what it became. When it was originally in UA, which is how I first discovered it, they had not settled on the like deep ocean, like hard theming. It was more like it could be that, or it could be some other far distant thing. And I took that and ran with it and made a warlock who was basically a Guardians of the Galaxy character. And like her whole thing was she was this like queer space tiefling who had like teleportation and like, transdimensional abilities where she would just like pop in and out of different planes and visit. And like I had a whole Far Realm plot that I wanted her to go on at some point.
That is so cool.
And like just the abilities that came with that class like immediately fed into that kind of like Marvel / Eldritch cosmic that I really was into at the time of like, her like patron is like the concept of space as a being. It was like,
awesome.
It was just so fun, right?
That.
So like that class slightly modded for flavor is one of my favorites. Those two I think are up there for sure. Light cleric if I have to pick a cleric. Sometimes Storm.
There's no half. It's just the things you unreasonably like or dislike about a subclass or thing, I think. We have my house, we've been keeping lists of the things that we unreasonably like or dislike for years now. And it's really weird to see the things that end up on there. It reveals a lot about a person.
I did have fun with Divine Soul Sorcerer one time. I thought that was an interesting way where you could like flavor all the sorcerer stuff as coming from some divine source. That's always fun. I got a radiant energy like thing with all my characters.
Natalie has a
handy a lot.
I just want my character to be able to glow. That's basically what it is. Like I like glowing things. So
that's great.
Glowing in wings.
Yeah.
Do you also have a favorite Monster of the Week playbook?
Ooh.
While I'm asking this question, and I will use the term playbook instead of just spouting nonsense like archetype this time.
Archetype is that's what they are. You're not like off with that.
I mean, I love the Divine who I play on the show. But like the playbook I find myself coming back to the most when I'm like asked to make characters for one shots, or that like I have sort of NPCs who I created first as players for one shots, and now they are in the story as NPCs for our characters.
Always.
Are Monstrous and Hex. Because like, yes, it is fun to have like the normal person in the Monster of the Week campaign, but I know that like that's not me. I would much rather be glowing and winged and flying around doing crazy stuff and like have cool monster powers or whatever. Play some sort of like real like, you know, monstrous creation or person.
And the mundane only works if they are surrounded by those other people.
Yeah. So, but Hex is fun because it's sort of spell. It's not spell slinger, which is more your classic like wizard. Hex is more like part of playing that playbook is figuring out what spells you're gonna know and learn. You don't like get fireball automatically. It's like if you want to learn that, you can, but now you're using one of your like customized magic things to create a very basic ability. So I like Hex a lot. It's got some very like, you know, oh, you're tapping into like magics you maybe shouldn't. What's it going to change about you? And Monstrous is always fun because especially in a modern fantasy setting, being a monster, depending on what the state of the world is like, how do you hide that? Do you transform? Do you not? Like, is it a thing you have to keep under control? Like, you can see how it mirrors my like desire to have an instant role play hook attached to it. Like,
absolutely.
So,
I love that. Yeah. So cool. Well, Natalie and Brittany, thank you so much for joining me. What an utter delight to spend this time with you.
Yeah. This is so much fun.
Brittany, where can people find you on the interwebs if they would like to do so, / if you would like them to?
Yeah. You can find all of us at Story Squad Cast on the usual socials. You can find my like podcast persona Instagram at Blue Electra Brittany. I changed it recently, so I have to remember what the new one is. Yeah, I don't have any of like the newfangled socials yet, but I'm working on it. All the blue skies and stuff, but probably eventually same name on everything.
Sure. Natalie, where can people find you?
I am on Blue Sky. To exist
it
there,
seems like
I guess.
The place to go.
Yeah.
It seems like the place to go at
I'm
this
on
point.
Instagram. You can look at my old cosplay photos. I have accounts on social media, and if you follow me and want to DM me, I check those. Like I treat social media more like a phone book and like a contacts page. Totally. I do my best to try and stay off of it, as I think more people should try to. It's better for your brain.
It's very smart and commendable.
So yeah, like, but I'm out there, and I would love for people to find the Storyteller Squad and give us a listen, because that's really where I've been posting content for the last 4 or 5 years.
That's where the good stuff is.
It's where the good stuff is. It's the stuff I care about. Like, as much as I respect the hustle of TikTok creators and everything, you know, they're literally going through as we record this, like, it is not a...
Yes, they are.
It is not
just to date this episode instantly.
Date this instantly. We love you,
Things
TikTok
are happening.
People.
R.I.P.
But like, it is... that is not an art form that I have found myself called to, or like a format I've been able to adapt to. So please, if you can find it in your hearts, and if you think it'll be good for your brain, try and absorb a long form bit of content with the Storyteller Squad. And we are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and also YouTube. If you want to be on YouTube, I guess.
Some people get their media there, I understand, in a weird way.
We're still just an audio podcast, but you'll have our cover on your screen.
So please check out my work. That is where I put myself on the internet. And sometimes, if you just want to see selfies of me at a con, at Natalie Fuina, pretty much anywhere that becomes relevant.
And the stories are really good, so go find them. Right? Yeah. At Story Squad Cast on the things.
Or our website. You can listen on the website too.
Or our website.
That's storytellersquad.com.
We will have links to all of these things. And, you know, the obligatory reminder, the Roll Report is on these social media things too. We are on Blue Sky. We're the same everywhere. You can find us at The Roll Report Cast. And if you like what you're hearing, you can check us out on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Ooh, shameless self-promotion at the end of the
We
episode.
love Patreon.
Thank you,
we all love
patrons.
Patreon. Thank you, our patrons. Thank you to Storyteller Squad patrons.
Thank you to all
and thank you-
patrons, really.
All patrons.
They're the best.
Hey, all you people that like make tons of tech money, you know what's cool? Art patronage. It was a whole thing
Thank
during
you
the
for
Renaissance.
sharing your 9-to-5 stability with us.
Yeah, it helps us be more stable. Thank you both so much for joining me. I never build an outro because I don't know how, but like you are delightful. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you
me
for
once
having
again.
this.
Thanks
This
for
was so
having
much
us.
fun.
Yeah.
This is great.
Until next time. And
Goodbye,
I'm going
adventurers.
to-
Take care.
Goodbye, adventurers, rollers, storytellers, and everyone in between, both or neither.